No one believed the boy could change anything. Frankly, no one believed the man in that bed could hear anything. Either 9 years of silence had turned him into a living ghost. The hospital room on the fourth floor of St. Catherine's smelled faintly of disinfectant and dying flowers. Dr. William Crane lay there, pale as parchment, his once hawkish features softened by time, his chest rising and falling in a mechanical rhythm that belonged more to the machine than to him. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, he remained trapped somewhere between breath and nothingness. Malik Turner, 14 years old and already too old for the way the system treated him, stepped into that room as if trespassing on holy ground. The boy wasn't supposed to be there. Orphans rarely made it past the lobby unless they were visiting a dying foster parent. But Malik had something no nurse, no neurologist, no priest had brought into that room in 9 years: the song. It was his third week at the community shelter when he first heard the name Dr. Crane. The whispers said he'd been a good man, once, though good, in the mouths of strangers, often came tangled with the kind of pity that barely hides judgment. What Malik didn't know yet was that Dr. Crane's name was also tied to something darker, something that made the staff avoid saying too much in front of the boy. Malik spotted the piano during one of his janitorial punishment shifts, a sun-faded upright tucked into the hospital's dusty rec room. It was chipped, missing a key, and so far out of tune that no one could tell if it was playing music or telling lies. But when Malik's fingers brushed its surface, a memory not his own seemed to bloom in the back of his mind. An old photograph he'd once scavenged from a trash pile came back to him. A young woman with kind eyes, sitting at a piano just like this, her hands poised mid-note. His mother? No, his mother had never looked like that. Yet the melody that haunted him came anyway. And so, one stolen afternoon, Malik wheeled the piano inch by painful inch down the hallway toward room 417. The nurses didn't notice. They rarely noticed him. That was the strange gift of being an unwanted child in a place like this: invisibility. By the time Malik set the piano by the window, his palms were raw. Dr. Crane hadn't moved. His eyes were closed, his mouth slack. Machines hummed at his side like distant insects. Malik sat. He wasn't a trained pianist. Most of what he knew came from watching strangers on street corners, filling the city air with sound for spare change. But the melody, it had no composer in his memory. It was older than him, and yet it belonged to him. He began to play. The notes were hesitant at first, stumbling over the warped keys. But then the rhythm found him soft, deliberate, achingly familiar. Each chord seemed to breathe life into the stale room. A nurse passing by froze at the door, her clipboard forgotten. Inside Dr. Crane's mind, darkness had been absolute for 9 years. It was a place without edges or direction until that day. The first note cut through the void like sunlight seeping into a locked cellar. Then came the second and the third, and suddenly he could smell something he hadn't in years: lilies and cinnamon. His mother's kitchen. His mother's voice, humming. His mother's piano. And just like that, his fingers twitched. The nurse gasped. Malik didn't stop playing. Malik didn't even notice the way the nurse's hand went to her mouth, or how her eyes brimmed with something dangerously close to tears. He was too deep in the sound to care. The melody was winding through him now, pulling something raw and aching to the surface. His feet pressed the pedals with surprising delicacy, coaxing the old piano to sing. Dr. William Crane's right hand twitched again. "Doctor?" the nurse whispered, her voice trembling like she'd seen a ghost. Malik kept playing, though his pulse was hammering in his ears. A second later, there was no mistaking it. Dr. Crane's eyelids fluttered. The nurse dropped her clipboard and bolted from the room, her shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Malik didn't stop. He couldn't. Every time he tried to slow the melody, an invisible tug urged him forward, as if some part of the man in the bed was clinging to each note. Inside Dr. Crane's head, memory had broken free like a flood. He saw his mother's hands, slender, veined, graceful, moving across ivory keys in their small Virginia home. He smelled the wood polish of that piano, heard the creak of the bench when he'd climb up beside her as a boy. And then another memory, sharper, darker. Crowds, sirens, shouting. His own voice raised, not in comfort, but in fury. Words he'd spoken in anger to a young black man in his operating room, words he'd never been able to take back. Malik hit a wrong key. His stomach twisted. He didn't know why, but the air in the room felt heavier. By the time the first doctor rushed in, a short man with tired eyes and a stethoscope slapping his chest, Malik was halfway through the piece. "What's happening?" the doctor barked. He moved," the nurse said, pointing at the bed. "He's waking up." The doctor's gaze darted from Malik to the piano to Dr. Crane. "Who are you, kid? How the hell did you get in here?" Malik hesitated. If he stopped, the music would vanish, and with it, whatever miracle was happening. "I said," Dr. Crane's lips parted. A dry, rasping sound came out. The doctor froze. "Play." The word was barely audible, like wind over broken glass. "Don't. Stop." The nurse's hand flew to her mouth again. Malik's throat tightened, but he nodded and kept playing. The hospital's security came 5 minutes later, summoned by the nurse who'd finally realized rules still applied, even to miracles. 2 men in Navy uniforms appeared at the doorway, hands resting on their belts like they expected trouble. "That's enough," one said, stepping inside. "No," the nurse's voice cracked. "Don't touch him." The taller guard squinted. "The patient or the kid?" "Both," she said firmly. But rules were rules, and within moments Malik found himself hauled off the piano bench by a hand gripping his arm. "Let me go," Malik snapped. "He told me to play past me." "Yeah, sure he did," the guard said, already steering him toward the hall. "Wait." The voice was louder this time, hoarse, but commanding. Dr. Crane's eyes were open now, pale blue and sharp despite the years. The guards froze. "I said, let him go," Crane repeated. His breathing was ragged, but there was authority in the way he spoke, a weight honed from years in charge of operating rooms. The guard released Malik reluctantly. "Sir, this kid isn't supposed to." "I don't care," Crane rasped. "He's the reason I'm awake." Silence clung to the room like dust. News spread through St. Catherine's faster than infection. By evening, nurses from other floors were peeking through the doorway, whispering, glancing at Malik like he was some sort of saint. The boy hated it. Attention had never been kind to him. They gave him a chair by the window while doctors ran tests on Dr. Crane. Blood work, reflex checks, an MRI. Every few minutes, someone asked how he was feeling, as if the last 9 years could be measured in numbers and charts. Malik kept his eyes on the rain sliding down the glass. It wasn't until later, when most of the staff had cleared out, that Crane spoke to him again. "You know that song?" the doctor said. His voice was stronger now, though still rough. Malik shrugged. "Guess so." "Where'd you learn it?" "Don't know." Malik's gaze stayed fixed on the window. "It was just in my head." Crane studied him for a long moment. "My mother used to play that song every night before bed. Haven't heard it since she died." Malik shifted in his seat, uncomfortable under the man's scrutiny. "Didn't mean to." "You meant exactly to," Crane interrupted gently. "You came in here for a reason. I just don't know what it is yet." That night, Malik didn't go back to the shelter. He stayed in the hospital's chapel until the janitor kicked him out, then found an unlocked supply closet to curl up in. His mind kept replaying the moment Crane's eyes had opened. It didn't make sense. People didn't just wake up because of music. But deep down, Malik knew it wasn't just the song. Something inside Crane had been waiting for it, like a key in a lock. What Malik didn't know yet was that unlocking it would also open a door neither of them could close. The next morning, the story hit the local news. "White doctor wakes from 9-year coma, music from black teen credited." The headline looked harmless enough, but the comments section burned like gasoline. "Figures. Bet the kid will try to sue." "Miracle? More like a setup." "These people will do anything for attention." Funny how the doctor was a hero until that kid showed up. Malik saw the posts because one of the nurses showed him, shaking her head like she couldn't believe people could be so cruel. But Malik could believe it. He'd lived it. Later that day, while the hospital administration debated what to do with him, Malik overheard 2 orderlies talking near the vending machines. "You remember Crane's case back in 16? One said. "Whole mess about that shooting?" "Yeah." Said he refused to operate on the kid who shot that cop. "That's not the way I heard it." Malik didn't hear the rest. His ears were ringing. Back in the hospital room, Crane noticed the change in Malik's face. "What happened?" he asked. Malik hesitated. "Someone said you didn't help a black kid once." "That true?" Crane's jaw tightened. He looked away, toward the rain-streaked window. "It's true," he said finally. "And it's the reason I ended up here." Malik frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Crane's eyes closed, and his voice dropped. "You keep playing for me, kid, and I'll tell you the whole story." Malik's hands hovered over the keys, his eyes narrowing. You want me to play just so you can talk? No, Crane said, his gaze steady. I want you to play because it keeps me here, keeps the fog from closing back in. And I want you to know why you, of all people, might hate me before you decide whether to stay. Malik said nothing. He pressed a single key low and soft like testing the water before diving in. Crane's voice was slow at first, the words searching for themselves. It was summer. July, I think. I was chief of surgery then top of my field, running on ego and too much caffeine. The ER brought in 2 patients. First was a police officer, white, mid-30s, gunshot wound to the abdomen. Second was a black teenager, maybe 17, with a bullet lodged near his spine. Malik's fingers stiffened on the keys. They told us the teen had shot the cop. Witnesses, radio chatter, the whole bit. The officer was barely hanging on. I made the call to operate on him first. Told the team to prep the kid for surgery after. But Crane's jaw tightened. The officer died on the table. And by the time we turned to the kid, he coded. We lost him. Malik stared at him. You're saying you chose? I'm saying I prioritized, Crane said sharply, then softened. But the media and the kid's family called it murder. Said I'd let him die because of the color of his skin. Malik's right hand dropped from the keys. Did you? Crane's eyes didn't flinch. I told myself I didn't. I told myself any surgeon would have done the same. But when I replay it in my head, I can't tell if I was moving on instinct or on something uglier. The melody faltered. That night, Crane went on. Someone followed me to my car. I never saw their face. Just heard footsteps, then pain. Then nothing until you. Malik leaned back, the weight of it settling in his chest. So you could have been in a coma, cause somebody thought you were a racist doctor. Or because I was, Crane said quietly. The next days blurred into a strange rhythm. Malik would sneak into the room in the morning, sit at the piano, and play while Crane talked. The nurses pretended not to see, though Malik caught more than one of them standing in the doorway, listening. Crane spoke of his childhood in a small southern town, the unspoken rules, the quiet biases passed down like family recipes. How he'd fought to see himself as one of the good ones, without ever asking who got to decide that. Prejudice isn't always loud, he told Malik one afternoon. Sometimes it's just the voice in your head telling you you're being practical when you're really being afraid. Malik didn't say much in return, but he listened. Not because he forgave him didn't, but because the story felt like something he needed to hear. It wasn't long before reporters showed up. At first, the hospital's PR team tried to keep them away, citing patient recovery. But the story was too good. Miracle awakening, mystery music boy, and the ghost of an old scandal. One afternoon, a tall woman with a press badge cornered Malik near the vending machines. You're Malik Turner, right? The boy who woke the coma doctor? Malik stiffened. I didn't wake nobody. He woke up. Sources say you played a song. She pressed, leaning in. You've been visiting every day? What? None of your business. Is it true? She said, lowering her voice, that Dr. Crane once refused to operate on a black teenager? Malik walked away without answering, but her words followed him down the hall. By the end of the week, the online comments had turned uglier. Kids just milking his 15 minutes. Bet the doctor wishes he'd stayed asleep. 2 victims, 9 years apart. The shelter director called Malik into her office, hands folded tight on the desk. You need to keep a low profile, she said. The hospital's starting to complain about reporters hanging around. So you want me to stop going? Malik said flatly. I'm saying you need to think about your safety. Malik laughed without humor. Lady, safety's not really a thing where I come from. That night, Malik slipped into Crane's room after visiting hours. The hallway was quiet, the only sound the hum of machines. Crane was awake, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. They're trying to keep you away from me, aren't they? Crane asked. Malik shrugged. Doesn't matter. I'm here. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Crane said, You know, when I first heard you playing, I thought it was a dream. That my mother had come to get me. You're still here, Malik said. Because of you. Malik shook his head. Don't say that. You got family or something. Someone else to thank. Crane's lips pressed thin. My father's dead. My mother's been gone 30 years. No wife. No kids. You're it. The next morning, everything blew open. A man claiming to be the brother of the teenager Crane had lost in the ER showed up at the hospital. He was in his late 20s now, wearing a leather jacket and an expression that could cut glass. "I want to see him," the man told security. The nurse on duty refused. Voices rose. By the time Malik arrived, a small crowd had gathered in the lobby. "You think just cause he's awake now it changes what he did?" the man shouted. "My brother's still dead. He can't play no song to bring him back." Malik stood frozen at the edge of the crowd. He didn't know the man, but the rawness in his voice was too familiar. When the man finally left, pushed gently toward the door by security, Malik slipped upstairs without a word. Crane was sitting up when Malik entered, the sunlight turning his hospital gown almost gold. "You heard?" Crane said. "Yeah," Malik replied. "I knew it would come," Crane murmured. "The past doesn't stay buried, no matter how long you're asleep." Malik crossed his arms. "So what are you gonna do?" "Depends," Crane said slowly, "on whether you'll help me." Malik frowned. "Help you do what?" "Find him. Tell him what really happened. And maybe listen to what he has to say." Malik's first instinct was to laugh hard. "You think that's gonna fix anything?" "No," Crane admitted. "But maybe it's a start." The next few days turned into planning sessions. Crane wasn't strong enough to leave the hospital yet, so Malik acted as his legs and ears, moving through the city to gather information. It was during one of these runs that Malik realized the weight of what he'd stepped into. Old wounds in the community weren't just open, they were infected, festering. Some people wanted Crane dead for what they believed he'd done. Others wanted Malik to stop helping him at all, calling it betrayal. The piano in Crane's room became their true space. Malik would play, and for a few minutes, the noise from outside couldn't reach them. But the world doesn't let miracles stay quiet forever. One rainy evening, Malik returned to the hospital to find police at the front desk. The receptionist's eyes darted toward him. "They're here about you," she whispered. His stomach dropped. Apparently, someone had filed a report claiming Malik had forced his way into Crane's room multiple times, harassing a vulnerable patient. It was a lie, but a convenient one. Crane insisted they let Malik stay. His voice had enough force now that even the officers backed down, but the message was clear: they were running out of time. "Kid," Crane said that night, "you ever feel like you're running out of second chances?" Malik looked at him. "I never had a first one." Crane closed his eyes. "Then maybe we can make one for each other." The rain hammered the window, and Malik began to play again, louder this time, as if daring the world to interrupt. 2 days later, Malik stood outside a rundown boxing gym on the south side, rain dripping off his hood. Inside, the smell of sweat and sawdust clung to the air. Heavy bags swung in slow arcs. The man he was looking for, Darius Hall, was taping his hands in the corner. His expression didn't change when he saw Malik, but his eyes sharpened. "You the kid from the news?" Darius said. Malik nodded. "Dr. Crane wants to talk to you." Darius's jaw tightened. He's had 9 years to think of something to say. "Why now?" "'Cause he finally can," Malik said simply. Darius snorted. "You his errand boy now? Guess they taught you early how to play the good one." The word stung, but Malik stood his ground. "I'm not here for him. I'm here for your brother. You don't have to listen, but I think he would have wanted you to." For a long moment, Darius said nothing. Then he tossed the tape roll aside. "You've got 10 minutes. No promises." The next afternoon, Darius walked into St. Catherine's with Malik. The air in Crane's room was tense enough to taste. Crane was sitting up, his eyes locked on the man who looked so much like the teenager in the old case file. Same sharp cheekbones, same wary stare. "Darius," Crane said. His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the blanket. "I'm sorry. Don't start with that," Darius replied coldly. "Say what happened." Crane took a deep breath. "That night, I made a choice. 2 patients. 1 white cop, 1 black teenager. I told myself it was triage cop was closer to death, so he went first. But I didn't question the report that your brother was the shooter. Didn't question if he was dangerous. I let that assumption push me, and it cost him his life." Darius's lips pressed into a thin line. "So you're saying you were biased?" "I'm saying I didn't see him," Crane said quietly. "I saw the label they put on him. And by the time I realized I might be wrong, it was too late." Silence settled in, heavy and raw. "You know," Darius said finally, "he didn't even like guns. He was walking home from the corner store. Wrong place, wrong time." Crane closed his eyes. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry, don't bring him back," Darius said, his voice shaking. "No," Crane admitted. "But maybe it can stop me from making the same mistake again. And maybe it can stop someone else, too." Malik watched the exchange, the air thick with grief and something unspoken. He didn't expect Darius to forgive Craney, wasn't sure he would in his place. But when Darius finally stood to leave, he didn't slam the door. He just nodded once to Malik, a small gesture that felt like a crack in a wall. The days that followed were quieter. The press still buzzed outside, hungry for a soundbite, but Malik and Crane ignored them. Malik kept playing the piano. Crane kept listening. One afternoon, as Malik finished the melody, Crane said, "You ever think about being a musician?" Malik shrugged. "Not much of a plan. Nobody's gonna pay to hear some kid from the shelter play an out-of-tune piano." Crane smiled faintly. "I would." A week later, Crane was discharged. The hospital wheeled him to the curb, reporters snapping photos. Malik stood back, hands shoved in his pockets. He wasn't sure if this was the end or just a pause. Crane caught his eye. "Come by tomorrow. I've got a piano that actually works." Malik almost smiled. "Guess we'll see." That night, Malik lay awake in the shelter bunk, listening to the rain on the roof. He thought about his mother, what little he remembered of her, and wondered if she'd ever played the melody. He thought about Crane, about the man he'd met in the bed versus the man from the story. People weren't just good or bad. They were both, sometimes in the same breath. Maybe that was the point. A month later, Malik stood in a crowded community center. Crane had organized a benefit concert, free admission, open to anyone. The crowd was a mix: hospital staff, shelter kids, local residents, even Darius, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. On stage, Malik sat at a polished grand piano. His fingers hovered over the keys, and for a moment, he felt the same invisible tug he'd felt that first day in Crane's room. He began to play. The melody filled the hall, soft, deliberate, achingly familiar. It wasn't just Crane's mother's song anymore. It was Malik's, too. It belonged to everyone listening. And in the front row, Dr. William Crane closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to remember and to keep himself awake in the ways that mattered. After the last note faded, the room stayed quiet for a breath before applause broke like a wave. Malik stood, blinking under the lights. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, he felt seen. Crane joined him on stage, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Told you they'd listen," he murmured. Malik looked out at the crowd, at Darius, at the nurses, at strangers whose faces were softened by the music, and thought maybe, just maybe, the song had more work to do. The concert became a yearly tradition. People came for the music, but they stayed for the conversations that followed. About bias, about second chances, about the quiet ways people could choose to see each other. And somewhere in the city, a boy who had once been invisible was learning that his voice could be louder than the noise around him if he was willing to play it. Final note: sometimes redemption isn't about erasing what was done, it's about changing what gets done next. For Dr. William Crane, that meant owning the truth. For Malik Turner, it meant believing his music could matter. For both, it meant that no matter the silence of the years before, the next note was still theirs to choose. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.